really want to pave roads, but the federal government's going to have to help us do it. And that was the beginning then of the National Highway Movement.
Americans now had more cars than bathtubs. But with our newfound freedom came traffic jams and smog and children running for safety. Everything about our lives was changing.
And the changes were so great that it's almost unheard of in American history. There probably is not another invention which has had such a singular impact on the daily life of average citizens.
We went on picnics with that first car. My mother would pack a picnic lunch on Sunday and we'd go out and drive around, you know. One time we drove clear up to Wisconsin and ate across the line so we could say we'd been in Wisconsin.
It created a whole new dimension of life, both for the adults and also for the youth.
Oh, of course. Yeah, family life changed quite a lot. The boys would have their cars and they'd go out. I went with a fellow from Mount Morris. He had a car. And he'd come down and we wouldn't stay in the house like we used to or on the porch. And we'd go to Dixon, generally go to Dixon. That was a big deal.
We went to Rockford. It rained real hard while we were up there. So we stayed there all night. And you know, it hadn't even rained hard down here. And I'll tell you, we had a real hard time explaining that to our folks when we got home.
And that was a radical change. During the 1920s, a teenager can simply hop into the car and go out at night, go into town to see a movie or to do something else. And you began to see the emergence of a separate teenage world, if you will, that was separate from the world of their parents.
The automobile moves courtship off the front porch and into the back seat. And this is something that a lot of ink will be spilled over in the 1920s. Moralists associated with Prohibition, associated with bans on jazz music, also are writing about the automobile as the third leg in the triumvirate of hell. There is dancing and jazz music, there is alcohol, and then there's the automobile.
There's always been the rumor that Henry Ford would not build his cars beyond a certain width or provide seats beyond a certain width because of his concern about lovemaking in automobiles. But as some wag once pointed out, given the Model T's 7-foot height, short couples could make love standing up.
Ford set out to sell America on wholesome vacations in the great outdoors. In a series of well-publicized excursions, he went camping with his chums, President Warren Harding and Thomas Edison. Americans were fascinated by the elite roughing it in their white shirts and ties.
Henry Ford became a folk hero because many people looked at Henry Ford and felt they were just like Ford, except that he had $1 billion and they didn't.
As the country's first great tour director, Ford now lured Americans to all the exotic places in the national parks. Like road gypsies, ingenious campers turned their Model Ts into a home away from home, setting up wherever the spirit moved them. No expensive hotels, no overpriced restaurants.
We just never had too much money, so we stayed in a roadside somewhere. We had a tent, and that old Model T Ford had the running boards. Mother had an old boiler that you used to boil your clothes. She filled that up with food, and that was on the side of the car. She was a goer. She loved to go.
In the 1920s, people would leave the farm and actually go somewhere to see some of the scenery in the nation.
Howard Fox and his family would leave Kansas and go touring every winter.
If you were a wheat farmer and you sold your livestock, you didn't have a whole lot to do in the wintertime. So my dad would take the family out to California and come back and harvest his crop in the spring.
In the 1920s, the automobile really becomes king in the United States. The automobile seemed to symbolize so much the what's American about us, in the sense of the wide open spaces and mobility. And the automobile almost became the substitute for the horse. You would ride off into the sunset. When the wind is in your hair and your elbow is out the window, it's a completely different feeling.
The Model T put this country on wheels. And it was that car which took America out of the mud and made it as mobile as it would become. It's hard to think of any product which has done more to change the culture of this country than the Model T.
By the mid-1920s, Henry Ford had the satisfaction of knowing that over half the cars in the world were Model Ts. But out in California, with its palm trees and fabulous weather, Lizzie would be forced to compete with a high style of custom-bodied sedans and low-slung roadsters. What no one understood, not even Ford, was that the Model T's days were now numbered.
Coming up.
He knew that he was designed for the common man and the middle class. He gave them imagery, wonderful, exciting imagery.
Driving Passion will continue on TBS.
It was Hollywood, the land of dreams and money, of movie stars and oil barons, and wild and giddy excess. This was a world Henry Ford detested. The feeling was mutual. Most Hollywood stars wouldn't be caught dead in a Model T.
The combination of great imagination and new excitement bred a group of people, wealthy people, who were recently wealthy in fact, who really wanted style. They wanted something special. And an ordinary car in the 20s was kind of boxy. At that time, it was fun to display your wealth. Women wore their jewelry, they enjoyed their costumes, and men dressed up just as well, and they loved their fast cars. The whole thing had tremendous drama, and everybody loved it.
Starting in 1911, rich Californians who hankered for cars that were outrageous and colorful turned to a small coach builder on South Main Street, the Earl Automobile Works. Harley Earl and his father had a prosperous business, building custom cars and movie props like the chariots used in Ben-Hur. Family friends included actor Al Jolson and film director Cecil B. DeMille.
Harley Earl's early experience was influenced by the dramas of the movie business. He himself became an absolute fashion plate. He had an excellent tailor. He was a tall man, towering, 6'5.5", a walking wardrobe. He had style. Wonderful white linen suit, a purple shirt and an orange tie, and green suede shoes. Now this knocked him dead. He always had a tremendous tan.
By his late 20s, Harley Earl had made a name for himself with his sensational designs.
Harley Earl, from the very beginning, had an unbelievably simple philosophy, because cars were so awkward and so high and so out of balance, and center of gravity was so bad. Harley Earl spent his life making cars lower, wider, and longer. Harley Earl put the flair in cars.
People in show business were really fascinated by touches of style, emphatic style. If they saw something that came out of Earl's imagination with these patent leather fenders, they'd stop and stare. They were really fascinated by the novelties.
Earl catered to his clients' every whim. Nothing was too outrageous. An Earl custom-built car would cost $28,000. And he had more work than he could handle.